Hello, I'm Jim Middleton. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Flying by the Seat of My Pants. This is an art entrepreneur podcast designed for the artists who, like many of us, wants to translate their passion into a paycheck. The tips and tricks myself and upcoming guests have learned along the way are what we want to share to get you on the one step closer with topics like how to promote, how to price, how to show your art, how to become a better artist yourself. For the first episode, we're going to tackle the obvious. And look, I'm going to stumble. I'm going to make mistakes and flubs in my words along the way. And I've decided from the beginning that rather than record and re-record and try to make it perfect, we're just going to try to have this like a conversation. And just in real life, I'm going to make mistakes along the way. But like I said, for the first episode, we're tackling the obvious. How the heck do I even get started? First off, I think we all have a personal story, what art means to us, why it's a passion for us. And I think this is kind of where you want to consider your own story. I'm going to give you my own background. Hey, if you've heard it before, if you're not into it, I'm actually going to put a timestamp in the description for this podcast. So you can skip ahead. You don't have to hear my story if you're not interested. If you want, but let's dive in. My earliest memory of art in my life has been sitting with a piece of paper and pencil drawing, which I have been since I was like a really little kid. My earliest memory is tracing Archie comics, and funny because tracing back then because I wanted them to look right. I had this whole thing about perfectionism even from the time that I was a kid. Archie comics and Garfield. I was a big comics person from the get-go. Peanuts was a big one. And the story my mother likes to tell a lot is when they took me for a preschool assessment, the guy asked me a bunch of questions, asked me what I like to do, and I said I like to draw. And he asked me to draw him something. And they wouldn't let my mother see what I drew. But I drew something. He looked kind of surprised and looked at me and asked me, "What is this?" And I said, "Leonardo." And he said, "He's right." So did I do a little simple Vitruvian Man or a simple Mona Lisa? I have no idea, but art's just been a huge part for me forever. And it was mostly people. Faces were always my big thing. That's what I wanted to draw over and over again. Portraits were always something I wanted to do. I remember in elementary school, middle school, high school, always doing drawings for friends, giving them to people. We're going to get into a different episode. We're going to talk about the difference between shadow talent and channel talent. Shadow talent is kind of what you might innately have, and channel talent is what you work on. I'll say that I had a higher level of shadow talent from the get-go. That doesn't make it better or worse. That's just kind of where I was at the time. But it also had a lot of negatives that came with it. So I was the art teacher's pet. I love my art teacher, Alice Whitney in Sussex, a fantastic art teacher. I think she's living in Fredericton now. But wonderful teacher, and worked very hard to get all her students to kind of open their eyes and see beyond their own little narrow lane of whatever art they were into. But I was just a dumb, arrogant kid who couldn't see past any of that. And I needed to, open myself up. So I was, whatever I did, she praised always in front of the class. Even when she tried to give me suggestions on, how to look at, impressionistic art or abstract art or, things outside the realm of realism, which is really where I only wanted to play at that age and point in my life. I disregarded. I wouldn't listen to that input. I just kind of turned it out. I didn't necessarily take advice from any peers in art class. I measured my own personal self-worth by how people responded to my art. I was arrogant and couldn't take a critique properly. I wasn't interested in learning new techniques or new ways to do things. I wasn't really all that interested in art history. And I just kind of let it sit. I tried to get into the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design here in Atlantic Canada. That was my one and only choice. I didn't look at any other options. I didn't research, didn't try to find anything else. Like a lot of things, I procrastinated and put it off and applied too late, so I didn't get in, which, just makes sense. And it was devastating. It was a first time that I'd ever been kind of like rejected for any of my art. Like I'd won local competitions and school stuff, and it's the first time anybody had ever said no, and understandably so. But yeah, it was a bit of a dig to my ego, and I just applied to university, and it became kind of like a secondary thing. I was working a ridiculous course load at school and overworked at like a minimum wage job while I was going to school, and it just kind of fell into the background, and I let it sit. And there are people who knew that I had drawn my whole life, and there are people who kind of thought, well, he doesn't do that anymore. Yeah, you did it a long time ago, but it's not really your thing now. And I'd get offended when I'd have somebody go like, oh, do you know anybody who can do art? I'm like, hey, what about me? And in my head, I thought of myself as an artist, but I was not acting as an artist. And then there was a catalyst moment that kind of changed everything. And I fell into painting. And that was a little over 2 years ago, April of 2018. And it changed everything. And I can jump into that story because I think it's more relevant when we're talking about getting yourself out and showcasing your work. And I think that story is going to fit better in then. But there's a switch. And I hope that if you're listening to this podcast that maybe you're ready for that switch. Maybe you're in a similar boat where you enjoy, art is something that you have a passion for. Don't mind me, I'm going to take a sip of my coffee because I'm a coffee guy. And art's something that you have a passion for, but maybe you're doing what I was doing and you're letting it sit by the wayside. And, especially now in 2020, in the middle of as it's waning down, this pandemic, we're just starting into August, and a lot of people, depending on when you're listening to this, maybe later on in the future, everybody's reassessing their life right now, really, because nothing's stable. What are you going to potentially do for yourself? And a big thing for me has always been, the thought that you can fail doing something you don't love. So why not try to do something you love? You know what I mean? And if you fail at it, try a different way and try again. And, it's really about that switch. That switch is the first thing. So I hope that first and foremost, if you're thinking about how do I even get started, you need that switch. You need to be ready to say, you know what? It's the time and we're going to do this. Right? So that's my background. Now we're going to talk about if you want to get started. I've narrowed it down to 3 things that you really kind of need right out of the gate. Number 1, create something related to your artwork every day. Literally, every day. I'll talk more about what I did when I went into painting in one of the other podcasts, but basically, if you ever heard, there's an art challenge called Inktober. Started by Jake Parker, wonderful pen and ink artist, which is, I before painting, it was, even though I worked in lots of different mediums, pencil and ink was kind of a background for me. And Inktober, the way it works is they do a 30-day challenge. One drawing shared publicly a day for the month of October. And there are theme lists. It's become really huge. It's not that old, but Jake will put out an official prompt list. Other people will put out their own personal prompt list. You can do whatever you want. Last year I did the challenge of was it last year? No, year before. I think I've done it 3 years. I decided to take all the prompts, but then put them into superheroes, right? Just as something different. But the core of what I'm trying to get at with Inktober is it really flexed my muscle to allow me to do a piece of artwork every day. Even if it's just a little sketch in my sketch pad, even if it's just a little drawing. Creating daily is an important part of taking your art from a hobby to a career. If you're not creating every day, then you're missing something. You need, and focus it's a big thing. So, okay, let's say, for example, maybe you're working on a painting and you want to get that painting done this week. And you're like, you know what? Well, Jim, it's going to take me 4 or 5 days, 2 weeks to do this painting. I don't have a new piece of art to share every day or to create every day. Well, to me, my rule, you can make your own personal rule. I'm not trying to tell you what your rule should be, but there should be something, related to your artwork daily. So maybe it's the art itself. Maybe it's planning stuff you can share, sketching, concept drawings, writing a blog, working on a podcast like this idiot's doing. It creates a habit. So you're doing something every day and it's focused on your artwork. And really, if this is something that you want to be a job, if you're like me and you're laid off from your regular job that, helps supplement the bills, and you've got 8 hours a day. That's why I got up this morning, like it was a day at work. I got up, I had a shower, I got dressed, I came down here and started the day with the podcast. And after that, I'm going to be prepping a big canvas that I've got to paint, and I'll share something about that. And I've got a commission I have to finish, and I'll be doing something with that. But I'm blocking out my day as an 8-hour day, so I've got lots of stuff to share. Some of you have full-time jobs, and this is an afterthought. But you know what? If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to need, I'm asking you to take an hour. My guess is all of us spend an hour sitting in front of the TV or, playing a video game or reading a book. And none of those things are necessarily bad. And sorry, just take a quick sip here. Like I said, I'm going to keep this raw and real, so I'm not going to worry too much about editing. But an hour, like my rule was when I started, and I'll talk, like I said, later on we'll talk about how I started, what my original, I did 100 paintings in 100 days. That was my starting point because I wanted to get good at it. But my rule of thumb was paint on canvas. I had to get downstairs. I had to put a canvas on the easel. I had to put 1 stroke of paint. That was the rule I gave myself. And you can use whatever rule you want. You can say, if you're working on doing print work, I'm going to get out the materials or I'm going to plan what my next print's going to look like. Maybe it's on paper. I don't know your process. If you're drawing, then I'm going to open my sketchbook and I'm going to fill 1 page. Or I'm, maybe it's just a line. But what I found is the rule of thumb is if you get set up to start and you're all ready to start, you're probably not going to do 1 pencil line or one bit of paint to canvas. You're going to want to keep working. You're going to want to do whatever you're thinking about, whatever excites you. So create daily, and have a notepad on you. So when inspiration strikes, and if you're like me at all, ideas pop up all day. You see things that give you ideas. You hear something that gives you ideas. Something on TV pops up, gives you ideas. You hear something on the radio. A friend says something. Write it down. Capture it all. I actually have my notebook here filled with stuff. Lots of paintings I want to do. Ideas for future podcasts. Capture it all. Create daily. There's a reason why the tagline on my website and the tagline on my card, my business card, is just keep creating. It's my number one mantra, and that's why it's the number one thing. If you want to take your art from amateur to professional, just keep creating. That's number 1. Okay, number 2. 2's kind of like a two-parter because this is something that I think every artist deals with in different levels. Fear and ego. So we talked about my history before. If you skip that, basically, I was an egotistical young kid. And to be honest, let's say I was egotistical about my art for a huge part of my life until recently that I kind of woke the hell up and kind of reconsidered everything. So ego's a big thing. Fear is a big thing. We all have them in different mixtures. And I think there's something that we both have to recognize and put into check if you want to move forward. This is critical, and that's the reason why it's number 2, ego and fear. I was consciously incompetent. I know that sounds weird because people might look at my work and say, man, that was really good. But like I said, shadow talent. Minimal training except for a good high school art teacher. No techniques. Never took any classes. I'll give you an example. Always draw like I wrote, with my hand up close, short little drawing lines. Get a pen and a piece of paper. Try to draw a straight line, okay, the same way you were writing. Just go from one side of the page to the other with a straight line. Okay? Try that with your wrist that you're going to try to do straight line. And then try to do another straight line crossing it, and then do another line, and keep crossing where the lines intersect. Keep trying to do that with your wrist, and try to do a straight line every time. Then try to do that with an actual artist technique where you stay away from your page a little bit, you hold your arm out straight, and you draw from the shoulder. So you actually pull your lines with your shoulder in a full direction, as opposed to trying to do it with your wrist. And look at the difference in how straight they are. Maybe you've got some control there, maybe you don't yet because you haven't used that muscle. But drawing from the shoulder or painting from the shoulder, and again, this is more on the drawing and painting side. I'm sure there are different things that apply to your specific discipline. But there are techniques out there that I was way too dumb to even bother looking at that could have made my work better, that could have made it easier. And putting my ego in check allowed me to understand that I didn't know crap, right? I haven't set my podcast to open language, and I think I probably will because I'm naturally a guy who curses a lot. But for now, I'm just trying to keep that in check. So that sounds silly. But yeah, I didn't have my ego in check, and it limited me, right? It affected the way I looked at other people's work. It meant that for the majority of my life, I'd look at somebody's artwork, and if they were better than me, then my ego would flare up and say, well, I could do that too. Given the right materials and time, I could absolutely do that. Or, hey, even better. I could do even better. Which is such a stupid way of looking at things. And if it was something that I thought was different from mine, and that here's the thing, then I would have said worse than mine. And now I can never say that. I don't say that about any art. I don't say any art is quote unquote worse than mine. And I encourage you not to do it either. You can look at art and say that somebody is learning, somebody's still finding their voice, somebody's still learning their tools, or hey, maybe they are approaching it in a completely different method than you do. Art is subjective, kids, right? What I love, somebody else is going to hate, right? Something that means the world to somebody might not be my cup of tea, but that doesn't devalue it. Art is incredibly important. I'm very passionate about this, guys. I really want you to take the time and stew on that thought. Let go of your ego, right? Don't let yourself say, well, they're just copying Jackson Pollock and throwing paint with no thought whatsoever onto their canvas. How do you know that? You're not in somebody's head, right? If they tell you that they don't really care and they're just throwing it on, well, okay, that's a little different, and that's certainly their choice to do it that way. But that doesn't mean you necessarily get the right to judge, and that doesn't mean you get the right to diminish. And that's why it's really important to me that you hear me on this ego thing. It crippled the way that I appreciated art. It kept me away from getting to know artists. It didn't allow me to take criticism of my work. I wasn't looking honestly at somebody's work. And the fact that I dismissed artwork out of hand is heartbreaking to me now. and that's because of ego. So guys, any creative, whether you're a musician, and I spent some years in a band. It's weird because I had strong shadow talent with my art. I didn't with music. Music I had to work at. I had to learn to play guitar. I had to learn to sing properly. I had to learn to take time to write. And I never had that same arrogance and ego with my music like I did with my artwork. And I think in some ways at that time, I was definitely approaching music in a better way. And I think at the time made me a bit of a better musician than I was an artist then, because I was more open. And I think that having your ego screw everything up, you really need to think about that. And it again, let that switch go. Let go of your ego. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to learn new things, because man, if you're going to get better, and we're going to talk about that later on, like how do we get in development and how we improve ourselves. Getting your ego in check and getting the balance, that's huge. Now, the other side of this coin, fear. Now, guys, I know artists. Fear is in all of us. And I mean, it's tied to ego, right? There's a reason why, I'd have this ego stuff, because it'd be a part of me that would have imposter syndrome and still do. And I think all of we struggle with it. I'm not as, that imposter syndrome is that voice in your head that says, I'm not as good as other people think I am. And people are going to find out that I'm not as good, or I'm not as good as some people think I am, and I really suck, right? That nagging self-doubt voice will cripple you, will stop you from even starting a project, will stop you from even thinking about it. What's everybody else going to think? What are they going to say? Man, at the end of the day, you can't control any of that. And this journey, while I love sharing my work and seeing the results from other people, it's your journey, right? You're doing this for you, maybe for your family, because you love to do art. And fear's only going to stop that, right? I am an extrovert, clearly, to a great degree. I mean, I'm an extrovert when it comes to talking about art, when it comes to talking about music, when I'm social with family and friends, but or peers. But I don't seek out the party. I would rather be down in my basement working, than out having a drink and socializing. That's just me. But I have lots of really good artist friends who are super introverted. And that's okay. That's a perfectly normal and regular artist personality. And we're going to have more of them come on as guests and stuff and talk. And I think that I'd love to hear their side, but my estimation is there's fear in there, because we're human beings and we all have it, right? So that's why, I love seeing somebody who's quiet, who, hangs out at the back of the group when you have a bunch of artists around, that as soon as you start talking work, right? You start talking about their process and how they created something. And I don't know if I have like a backstage pass for artist discussions where I already am, kind of, working in similar material that maybe they feel like I can understand. So it's easier to talk to me. But I love seeing somebody going from, kind of withdrawn and quiet to lighting up, talking about their work. Like, it's awesome. I love that. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to talk to other artists and see them break out of that bubble of fear, even if it's just for a little while. Right? So I think that's something that, guys, if you want to move forward and you want to make this your career, you're going to have to show your work. You're going to have to talk about your work. You're going to have to get in front of people. You're going to have art shows. You're going to have to do commissions and speak to clients, you're going to need to let go of fear. And you need to check your damn ego at the door. So ego and fear, that's number 2. So 1, create daily. Number 2, let go of ego and fear. And my number 3 thing, and I think potentially one of the most important, if you want to get started on this art career and, where do we go next? Get to know your local art community. Sounds like a simple thing, doesn't it? Look up to see what art shows are going on in your area. Group shows, gallery viewings. Restaurants that have paintings hanging up that display, people's artwork. You need to know who these people are. Because it's only going to give you insight. It's only going to make you better. And this is true without exaggeration. About 2.5 years ago, I didn't know a single artist in my hometown. Not one. And this is a town of 50,000 people, 75,000 in the surrounding area. So just by numbers, there should be a lot of damn artists, right? Now I probably know somewhere in the area of 30 to 50 that I've met personally and that I can call by name and recognize as soon as I see them, and I know what they do as their medium that they like to work with. I know I can recognize style of their pieces. If I'm out and around and I see one of their works, I'm like, I know whose work that is. Or behind me, this little painting right here in the middle, that's an Alison Vieno. She's a local, amazing abstract artist that I am very fortunate to call friend, that I get the chance to meet and talk to and get to know. And we have similar energies. She's super bubbly, super awesome. But she has so many strengths and things that I didn't have at the time and still might not have now. And the insight that they provide, it started with, I guess I did know one artist in the city, my mother-in-law. She's painted for years. And she went to a group called the Under 100 Art Sale that had 30 or 40 artists, that maybe up to 50 at that point, that they did a biannual show, and it ran for a week. And I had started painting, and I thought, well, maybe I could get my name in for that. And actually, I didn't even really have any work. I think I had done, here's what happened. I did Inktober, which got me into a routine of doing something every day. And then I couldn't figure out what to do next. And then I happened to fall into painting. But before that, I had just done Inktober, so I really had just drawings and stuff. And I had submitted to see if I could get in that art show. They were already full. They had lots of artists, which is fine. And I went to it anyway. It didn't matter that I didn't have work there. I went to the show. There were 40 to 50 artists that were displaying work, and just walked through, looked at the work, saw what kind of styles were up there, what people were doing, talked to some of the artists that were there, pointed at particular pieces that I liked. And this wasn't an instantaneous overnight thing. It kind of went in pieces. I started doing my 100 paintings in 100 days and started sharing paintings online, putting up a painting every day. And a lot of them were simple, little ones, single things. But, I was working all day. I'd come home and I'd paint at night, and then I'd post it and keep on moving. And it just started a person at a time, here and there. And then they had a local market that ran in the evenings over the summer. And they needed somebody who was willing to sit outside and paint at night, do a live painting while the market was going on. And that was a big part of I'm going to add this in. Like, we're talking about 1, 2, and 3, right? We're talking about create daily, let go of fear and ego, get to know your local art community. And a big part of getting to know your local art community is to simplify, be willing to say yes, right? If somebody asks you if you're up for something, you want to come to my art show? Yes. You want to, are you willing to, show some of your work here? Yes. Would you like to, we really like this piece that you did. Would you be willing to show it at our restaurant space? Yes. Right? Try to, anytime that, oh God, I can't do that, comes up in your head, try to squash it down with a yes. Think to yourself, I really need to give this a shot. I really need to try. And if it does, and some things won't work. Some things are like, oh well, I tried it. Like I did a festival last summer, and it was a great experience, but it was not good for me art-wise. I got some people to see my work. I probably sold a few prints, and that covered the cost of me going there and back, but I didn't really make any money at it. But I would not say that it was a bad thing, because it introduced me to more artists. I got to know some of the artists who were running the event and attending the event. I get to meet local Atlantic Canadian celebrity that's on the Trailer Park Boys, who also happens to be an artist themselves. These are all good interactions, guys. These are all great things to kind of open you up to this whole new world and a whole new group of people. So getting to know your local art community and not being afraid to, putting your ego and fear in check, asking somebody what inspired them to do that piece, ask them what their process was. Artists enjoy talking about their work, right? And be open to listening. Don't just ask and tune it out until you get a chance to talk, right? Genuinely be interested in what they have to say and take it in. I never asked anybody for how I should do something with my artwork until I got to know local artists. And I bit the bullet and asked somebody, I said, what do you think about this in the painting? I think I'm almost done, but there's something not quite right. They made a suggestion that was wonderful and totally added to my piece. And if I hadn't have been able to put my ego in check, let go of my fear of looking stupid, or that they're going to think, oh, well, he's got to ask me. You know what I mean? Let go of all that crap. And it just changed everything. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky to know the artists that I've met in town. You may get lucky and find a mentor, somebody who's been doing it a long time, who's willing to kind of take you under their wing and say, hey, buddy, try this, right? Don't do that. This isn't going to work. But it'll also help you with, one of our next things that we're going to talk about is, after you get to know your artist community, it's going to help you kind of decide, what should I sell and where do I sell it? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about the next time when we're flying by the seat of our pants. I hope you had a good time today, guys. I hope I answered some questions for you. You can message me through Instagram, Flying by the Seat of My Paints. You can email at flyingbythesеatofmypaints@gmail.com. I'm actually looking to set up on the Anchor channel where you can leave a voice message. We will be answering questions. I do intend to have other local artists on as we kind of tackle these topics. And again, we're going to work to get you from passion to paycheck. I hope this was informative. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.